All right, hello everyone, and welcome to NEOJOY. We will discuss blockchain technology today and use cases where blockchain technology is quite useful. And my presentation will be a short introduction on where we can apply blockchain and the problems that it attempts to solve, and also present a bit about the technology behind the NEO and the added value that NEO adds. 大家好，今天我们会讨论的是区块链和它有用的方法。我的介绍会说一点区块链的特点，还有我们 NEO 的一些更价值的一些特点。我的那个演讲主要是英文的，但是如果你们有什么问题的话，也可以用中文提出来的。So my name is Malcolm and I'm R&D manager at the NEO team. And I work with a consensus algorithm and the governance model, and also with the economic model. And I'm also receiving a lot of projects from the community, and I love to go through all these projects and see which of these use cases that are actually fulfilling real-world needs and solving real-world problems. So I'm very excited to be here today and to meet all of you and to discuss with you on what we can actually do with blockchain. So I have my background in SaaS, as software as a service. So in SaaS you are providing a software service usually through a company and a centralized service. And when looking at it from a SaaS perspective, there are especially three characteristics in blockchain that are quite interesting. And it's these three: that blockchain is distributed, all changes and the versions in the blockchain is visible to everyone, and everything is traceable in the blockchain. And I will explain more about these three. So blockchain is distributed. Let's start with comparing that with a common software service that you may provide as a company. You will have your own server with your own hardware, and you may have a backup hardware configuration which runs on a separate power line to have some mitigation risk in case hardware would fail or if the power line would fail. And all of this is fine, but you are still open and quite vulnerable since you have only one attack surface. And you may choose to set up a second service and second server at another geographic location, but it's still quite open attack surfaces. So in blockchain it's very different. In blockchain you have everything distributed among tenfold, hundredfold, or even thousandfold of, you can call it server or nodes. And all of these are running the same software. They are executing the same code, and they are storing the same information. So it doesn't matter if 5, 6, or 7 of these goes down or gets attacked, because all of the other ones will be running at the same time and will be able to process all the data. And then you have that all changes, and you can almost see it as versions of data will always be visible in the blockchain. If you have a centralized service and you have it on your own hardware and someone goes directly into the database and make changes, it may not always be traceable of who did the change. And even more, it will obviously not be visible to someone from the outside. The consumer will not know what was changed and who changed it. So that's what this left picture here tries to simulate, that if there is changes, you will always only know, as a consumer, you will always only know the latest version. You will not have direct access to all the history. And in public blockchains, it's different, because every transfer of data and every changes of data is stored on the blockchain, and also related to the previous picture, that it's distributed among tenfold, hundredfolds of different nodes. So if someone tries to change the history, it won't be in sync with the other nodes, which means that you are unable to change something in the history. And the third characteristic that's interesting if you have a SaaS background as me, is that everything is traceable. Even here you have traceability in, if you have a centralized server, you can set up logs and you can log changes. On the other hand, you may not log exactly everything, and as I mentioned previously, it's not open to the consumer. The consumer cannot see what was changed, when it was changed, and by whom it was changed. So these three characteristics are quite special to blockchain, and these are the problems that you can actually solve with blockchain technology. So what is NEO then? Well, NEO is a public blockchain that aims to enhance the current society and make our current economy better and more efficient. So, of course, NEO is a blockchain built on blockchain technology, so it shares the characteristics that I previously talked about. It's distributed, everything is visible, and everything is traceable. But NEO also adds supporting technologies, which is very useful for the industry and for our society. And as mentioned before me, the three parts of, or the three pillars of NEO Smart Economy is digital assets, digital identity, and smart contracts. And we also have something that we call NEOX, which is a cross-chain protocol. And I will explain more about that a little bit later. So what do we mean with a digital asset? Well, let's play with the idea that you are creating a digital object, a digital asset that has some sort of value. Let's say it's very valuable and you want to store it somehow. If you store it on your own laptop, for example, you will have a quite high risk. You can lose your laptop, hardware can fail, your laptop can be stolen. So that's not really a good idea. So what you can do then is you store this digital asset, which has quite high value, at a third-party service provider instead. It would be similar to uploading it to a cloud service and let them take care of the storage of your valuable asset. On the other hand, this doesn't really solve the problem because you only move the risk to the third-party provider instead. The third-party provider can also have hardware failures. They can also have loss of data, and they can get hacked as well. And they may even have someone on the inside that's not trustworthy, someone with authorization who steals digital assets at a third-party provider. So it's also not really an optimal solution. So here, blockchain is very, very interesting because what we do if you want to store a digital asset with value, of course, you want to prove that you are the owner of that asset. So going back to this picture, as I showed you before, that everything is distributed, not only will it be stored at one server location that you are the owner, but it will be distributed so that everybody that is participating in the network, hundreds, thousandfolds of nodes, they all have registered you as the owner of that digital asset. NEO also applies digital identity. So our goal and our mission is to have a smart economy, and that with digital identity we quite differ ourselves from other blockchain technologies. Many blockchain platforms, they aim to have privacy and they want to have people to be anonymous. So you remember previously when I said that everything is traceable on the blockchain. That's true with a little bit of twist. So what you can trace on the blockchain is actually you can trace transfers and data changes back to an address that looks something like the left picture here. So it will be seemingly a random string of letters and numbers, but you will not really know who is the owner of that string or that address. So NEO aims to implement NEOID to be able to link these seemingly randomly strings of addresses to real identities. That's something that we need to be able to use blockchain technology with the real economy and like the situation is built up today for our society. For example, if you are trading with someone, you want to send a digital asset to someone, you want to know who you are trading with, you want to know who you are sending it to. If you are coming up to a digital agreement with anyone, you are writing a smart contract, which I will explain on the next slide, then you want to know that all the parties of that contract is real persons and you want to know who they are so that they can also be held responsible and accountable for the things that you have agreed upon. And of course, it's very interesting for institutions and companies because in our economy, there is a need for regulation. So we need to control and see how assets are transferred, enabled to work with the current economy. So this is what NEO aims to achieve. So what is a smart contract? Let's compare it with a regular contract, a normal contract. You have two people or two companies, and you have terms and conditions on the contract, things that you agree to implement or agree to carry out. You will sign the signature and you will place a stamp on that contract, and that's a legally binding contract, and you are supposed by law to follow that contract. But there are many cases where there are different opinions about what the contract actually means. There may even be cases where the other party is not honoring the contract, and then you are entering a quite long process of talking with the other party, try to make him fulfill the agreements in the contract. And if that doesn't work, you need to seek legal counsel and maybe go through legal action in order to enforce that contract. So a smart contract that we use in NEO, that's actually similar to a regular contract, but all the terms and conditions are written in code. So you can see it as an automatic program that is fulfilling all the terms and conditions of the contract. And using a smart contract on NEO and blockchain technologies, it's quite interesting as well because of the same distributed nature as I told you earlier. If you have a smart contract running on a central server, then that central server can be attacked and try to prevent an automatic contract to carry out the tasks. But since everything is distributed, you can be sure that all the conditions and all the terms in that smart contract will actually be executed, and it will be executed exactly as what's written inside the contract. And NEO we want to reach out to as many developers and as many people as possible. So we support writing smart contracts in all the most popular programming languages. For example, C#, Java, Go, and we have even more language support in development, for example, Python. So our goal is that companies should be able to develop smart contracts with the engineers that they already have. They should not need to employ new engineers specifically for smart contracts, but they should be able to do this development with their current engineers. And what you can see here is actually a real smart contract that's written on the NEO platform. And the top part is written in C#, and the bottom part is written in Java. And it's the exact same functionality. So these two can be compiled and deployed on the NEO mainnet, and they will have the exact same functionality. And what this smart contract is, it has two conditions. A smart contract can store digital assets. So let's say that this contract is storing digital assets. It first have a condition on a timestamp. It's quite small here, so I don't know if everybody can see it. But it has an if condition on the timestamp. So you can, for example, say that before 1st of January 2018, nobody is allowed to access the digital assets. So anyone who tries to call this contract and invoke it before that date, they will not be able to access the funds. The contract will automatically just deny the access. The second condition is to check who is trying to access it. So let's say that we pass 1st of January 2018. So the timestamp check will pass. Then the smart contract will do a check on who is trying to access this contract. And if the signature is correct, that person actually should be able to get access to this digital contract, then he will be granted access, and he can transfer and do what he needs to do with the digital assets within that contract. It's quite simple lock contract and quite common in sort of like an hello world example in blockchain development. So some of you who are already looking into blockchain technology and are evaluating to use it, you may have realized that there are two different scenarios by using blockchain. You have the public blockchains and you have the private blockchains. And many of you may even have the conflict that you want to use a public blockchain, but you also have specific requirements that you would only be able to achieve in a private blockchain. And that could be to, for example, that you have certain requirements on data, that you have data that you only want to keep within an enterprise. or it can be that you have other specific requirements on the blockchain. And these, but you still want to use a public blockchain, but because of the requirements on private data, you may see the conflict there. So this was realized by the founders of NEO quite early. So the founders of NEO also founded a company called On-Chain, and the presentation after me will talk more about that. And On-Chain, they used the NEO architecture to develop a framework, which they call the DNA framework. Also more about that later. So since it have the same basic architecture underneath, we are developing a protocol called NEOX protocol for these DNA architecture blockchains to communicate with each other. So what this means in practice is that you can use the DNA architecture for private enterprises to fulfill your enterprise's need for the internal blockchain. And you can use the NEOX protocol to connect to the public blockchain, which is NEO. So with this connection between private and public blockchain, you can fulfill both your needs for the private blockchain and for the public blockchain. And this is also quite special for NEO and the DNA architecture. So what about some use cases? What can you actually use blockchain for? Well, there are Turing complete. So the only thing that stops you from developing smart contracts is your own imagination. There are some quite easy examples. You can release assets after a set time. You can agree on how to contribute assets or distribute assets under certain conditions. And you can have several parties also coming to an agreement in a smart contract and do some conditions based on that. You can do sharing of data. So if there is any data that should be accessible and available to everyone, and also immutable, so you should not be able to change it, then you can use a public blockchain for that as well. And also in general, any agreement where you would rather trust a code and have set conditions and set results from a contract, and you rather trust the code instead of a person itself, then a smart contract is quite useful. So just to take some ideas, so you have something to think about. You have the logistics tracking example. Let's say you're shipping a parcel from one country to another. And in that process, there may be up to 50 different persons participating. So you will never know where the parcel actually is located. There are centralized tracking systems. You can search online and see where the parcel is, but it's very limited information. And it's not everybody in the logistic processes is not part of that tracking structure. And there's also some joint protection there, since it's a logistic chain. If the parcel gets lost, and the tracking service provider may not want to give the real reason why it's lost, because they are cooperating with other person in the logistic chains and they want to keep a good relationship with them. So this is, for example, this is a good example where blockchain technology can be used for public information, where you track each step in the logistic chain to make it publicly available so that everybody knows where the parcel is located, and in case it would get lost, you know which party is responsible for the loss. And it's quite similar to the supply chain case, where you can connect a full supply chain. A product is often not by one manufacturer alone, but a product is combined by many components from many different suppliers. So as a consumer, you don't know where the components come from. If we track all the steps in the process from the supplier to the end product and make that information publicly available, then the consumer can know, for example, if they buy the product, they know if it's counterfeit or not, because a counterfeit product will not have the full history from the supplier to the end product. You will be able to track fake drugs in the pharmaceutical industry. Fake drugs will not have the same full supply chain history as the real drugs would have. And you can also trace where products are entering black market, because since you have the whole supply chain history, you can see where the product actually left. So if a product ends up in the market before it should have ended up in the product, you can see at which step in the supply chain it actually got lost. There will be many more detailed use cases in the presentation after me, so you will get more examples in Chinese as well. So in summary, NEO is, we aim to achieve a smart economy that supports our society and our economy as it is today. So in comparison with other blockchain platforms, we don't want to create something optional, and we don't want to create something behind the scenes, but we actually want to enhance the current economy. And we use digital assets, digital identity, smart contracts in many programming languages. And we have the NEOX cross-chain protocol to combine private blockchains with the public blockchains. And that's for me today. Thank you.